Well, good afternoon, and welcome to the inaugural show of Get Schooled. Today's topic, Get Schooled on Education. In other words, we need to know more about it. Today's April 3rd. Am I right?
You're right. It is April.
Today's April 3rd. We're going to be on Wednesdays from 12 to 1. We're coming to you live on the LaRue Press Network on YouTube. The way to find the show, if you're watching me, I guess you've already found it. But to tell anyone, they can just go to YouTube and type in YouTube LaRue, that's L-E-R-U-E, Network. Right?
That would be the LaRue Press Network.
LaRue
So
Press.
LaRue Press Network, and you'll find us.
Network, and you'll find it there. If you happen to miss it live, you can catch it on the archive if you go to that same site. Another thing, if you've got a pen out anywhere, you might want to go check out educationcrusade.org. Educationcrusade.org is, we write about county issues. We're coming to you from Washoe County, Nevada, specifically in Reno. But Education Crusade issues periodic briefs that you can subscribe to for free, and they just deal with all the issues going on with our schools. We'd love to have you text any questions or comments you've got about our schools. There's so much to get into. I would argue that the schools are the biggest issue we have in our country because they are the incubator for every solution or problem that we have. When they're working, our country works. When they're not, it doesn't. And I think it's pretty accurate to say right now our schools are not working and our country's really struggling. Today is Get Schooled on Education. Several will be. We'll also picking up other topics that affect us, but people just kind of don't hear the truth about them. And that would include getting schooled, getting up or learning on homelessness, on the whole criminal justice system, including our prisons. And, what is our other one? Especially on race, especially on racial issues. You know, they just say, truth is the first casualty of war. And there seem to be so many, call them what they are, wars going on in our country. The divisiveness, primarily politically, but religiously and every other way. And so hopefully Get Schooled will give you some good information on this. Let's see if we've got it here. And again, this is our first one, so please be patient. What we're going to try to give you is just, my name's Paul White, and how do I know what I'm talking about, which is kind of a good thing to know if you're going to tell somebody something. 38 years, well, actually, I started in education in Detroit, Michigan in 1974. I was a student teaching an English class with about 42 kids in it, and I'd never set foot in a classroom as a teacher before. And it was a challenging group. It was Taft Middle School, Taft Junior High. And my teacher said, well, here's my desk. Here's what they need to learn today, and I'll be in the teacher's room. So the door shut on me and 40-some 8th graders. And I thought I was handling it real calmly and real well until I went to the bathroom after that period ended, and I looked in the mirror, and I looked like I'd been dunked in a pool. I was such a flop sweat. But I just loved it. I loved it so much I couldn't believe that I'd ever get paid for doing it. So 38 years later, I've been a teacher, a principal, a director, and a charter school superintendent at elementary, middle school, and high school levels. A lot of good things have come my way. I was a 2-time Educator of the Year. One of the schools that I transformed, and my specialty was turning real struggling schools into great schools. Schools that were struggling with drugs, gangs, violence, no learning. And so one of these schools became a top 5 stories of the year for People magazine, had a personal invitation to the H.W. Bush White House. But now balancing that, I also lost 6 jobs. So you might ask yourself, how do you lose 6 jobs if you seem to be doing your job by people recognizing it and fixing schools? Well, it's because the schools that were not fixed, there were people there who had a vested interest in them staying that way. And so what I was doing was exposing what they were not doing. And that's why it was challenging. So it's been good. We still fight it. We're fighting it today, and you'll hear that a lot of the issues we're talking about in Washoe County are issues that anybody listening here, I understand we have a group in North Carolina, and how do you do? Glad you joined us. Please text in and let us know where you're hearing from, questions you have, what you'd like, your thoughts about it during the show. We can respond live. Anyhow,
I want to.
Jan,
this
this is Jan Hermson. This is our studio engineer and also the founder of LaRue Press. So
thank you so much. Good to meet everybody, and I just want to remind you that you can text to us at 775-399-2888 and also comment on YouTube and Facebook. We can see the comments here, and we'll be happy to share them with Paul and ask him to respond.
So we've got so many issues with schools, and I guarantee you we'll be able to share a lot of things with you that you're not aware of and ideas to give you for responding to your local schools, whether it's with children, grandchildren, or just your interest in education as a whole. So here in Nevada, not unlike most every state, going to school is mandatory. Starting at the age of 7. And the question comes up, ideally, I'd always ask my students, well, what's the purpose? Why do you go to school? And 100 out of 100 kids would always say, well, we have to be smart. And I'd tell them, no, that's really got nothing to do with anything. The government could really care less whether you're smart or not. What a state, a community, a county needs to survive, a nation needs to survive, are people who have the skills to live independently and the ability to contribute. And when we don't have that, we're in trouble. Well, by that definition, we're in trouble right now because we know our kids, like Nevada, for well over a decade, has ranked 50th in the United States for the worst quality education system. And it sounds terrible, and it is, especially because the standards are so low. But a lot more on all of this as we go along. But the thing that makes it the worst is that none of these other 49 states that are ahead of us are really ahead of us by much more than a hair's breadth. No one is really killing it. Florida is number 1. Nevada is number 50. When you look at the scores, the percentage of kids who are, they call them on test scores in education jargon, below proficient or proficient or higher. What they should tell you is that if they're less than proficient, it becomes the definition of functionally illiterate, which right now is anywhere, depending on the city you're in America. The functional illiteracy rate with reading and math ranges from 40% in the better states to, in Nevada, 60 to 82% to, depending on race as they break out the scores, in some categories, the kids are as much as 96% functionally illiterate. And I believe a few years ago, Baltimore, Maryland, ran when they weren't smashing their bridges. Baltimore, Maryland did not have a child in 11th grade who was considered functionally literate in math. And what's this mean to us? Well, it means that for all this money we're spending, we spend, I believe, many times more than most any other country on earth on education. And yet we rank, typically between 25th and 30th in terms of where we place in quality of education in the world. So let's look at, with schools, with the issues right now, and people are hearing more things about them. And here are the issues. The issues right now, the four main issues, 3 are cause and 1 is effect. The issues that are damaging our schools are, the first one is, well, a lot of the kids just don't show up. Well, how do you teach children who aren't there? Well, you don't. And not only do they not show up, roughly, like in Washoe County here, between 30 and 60% are chronically truant, or just don't bother on any given day. So what's that mean? Well, it means a teacher who has got maybe half of her class there has a great idea for a really quality unit she's going to teach, or he is going to teach. And they present it, they introduce it to the kids. Oh, you're going to have to research and learn how to take notes and write drafts and create presentation, PowerPoints, etc. And they have a great class to teach, or giving the students all they need to know to get on this great project. And then the next day, sometimes that half doesn't show up, and the half who wasn't there comes, or a mixture. And so the teacher tries to start in on the second day of teaching this great unit. And the kids who weren't there the previous day are, hey, what are you doing? I'm lost. Come here, you got to go. Well, while the students who were there the previous day are saying, we heard this yesterday. We want to get going on what we're doing. So with half the class being held back and half the class not knowing what's going on, needing a second introduction, pretty much the teacher just gives up, turns it over to the computer, to where the kids do just some absolute mindless attempts at just reading a little thing, punching A, B, C, or D, moving ahead. This is so, how important is absence? It's huge. And what do schools do? Typically they hire an army of counselors and attendance officers to beg and plead with the parents and the children to come to school. What they could do and should do, and in great schools they do it, is simply enforce the law, which usually provides for court appearances, fines, and other penalties for parents who don't get their kids to school and the kids who don't show up. Easy enough, isn't it? I've worked in 7 different districts. I've transformed 12 different schools in my career. How many schools, other than the ones that I got authority over and got to run, how many of those schools ever enforced the law on attendance? None. We're not doing it here. And so people flail about, why aren't our kids learning more? And yet they don't want to do something as simple as just enforce the law that would put that problem to bed. So nobody shows up. Well, what's the second big problem they have with schools? They don't show up clean and sober. Right now, student estimates, teacher estimates, parent estimates, 50 to 75% of our kids are under the influence of some kind of controlled substance in school. Some are abusing pharmaceuticals, a lot of them with street drugs, another group with alcohol, some with all three. But they're abusing them. Well, not only can you not teach someone that's not there, you can't teach someone who's under the influence. It's like trying to have a meaningful conversation with someone who's drunk or high. It just doesn't happen. And not only that, it often leads to really, really harsh behavior in the classroom too, and with each other, students in there. So what do they do with drugs and alcohol? Nothing. They ignore it like it doesn't exist. Back in the days, the old DARE programs that the police were promoting in the schools, if you go back that far, and especially if you were teaching, you understand that the statistics on that were actually that it was inclined to lead kids to experimenting with drugs. It wasn't very well thought out. But what if schools replaced it with? They don't really have anything right now. With 50 to 75% of our kids in Washoe County, and probably your county too, 50 to 75% using every day in the bathrooms, on the campus, in class. What are the schools doing? Nothing. What could they do? Well, I've never seen drug testing is unarguable. It's needed. But I've never seen drug testing when it was forced, involuntary. I've never seen it work. So what did we try? I ran for 20 years a totally voluntary drug testing program. And it got virtually 100% of my school, who was virtually 100% kids who had drug and alcohol issues. It got them clean and kept them clean. Could schools do this? Could anyone? We call it the West Valley method. And what it does is it encourages in kids, it encourages a desire to do the right thing. There was a sign one time, allegedly on the door of a friend's church, Quakers, back in the Northeast many years ago. And it said, "Friends, believe that when you speak to the good in a man, you find right answers." And this is how the West Valley method for voluntary drug testing works. We would talk to each student one at a time, and with their parents, we would tell them everybody wants to have a school they can be proud of, and they want to be purporting themselves in a way that they can be proud of, and that can't happen if they're using at school. And so we said what we were asking them is for their support in making our school a great school by doing something that they really wanted to do anyhow, and that was to be clear-headed so they can learn the best, they can be proud of themselves. Well, in 20 years, pitching it this way, I absolutely never had a single parent or a single student say, I don't want to be clean and sober. I want to be like an idiot in school and learn nothing and be a nuisance to myself and others and run the physical risks, the health risks that go with it. It worked wonderfully. It still would. But for instance, here in Washoe County, I've offered several times to the school board to give them a 15-minute presentation at a board meeting to explain to them how we did it, how they could do it. We have 60,000 students in ours, about 100 schools. No interest whatsoever. Never heard back anything. Meanwhile, how many kids have we had commit suicide, severely overdose, have all kinds of criminal issues from this? Countless, and the numbers are growing. And so you'll see, we get to the biggest mistake we make with schools is that we see all these things that kids are doing, and we speak of, bad kids or tough kids or kids doing whatever. Most of my 38 years has been spent with children who had that title prior to coming into the kind of program that can be run. And almost without exception, the ones who weren't removed from the program, ended up totally being some of the best young people and growing into some of the best adults you'd ever know. And I'm still friends with many of them to this day, going clear back to 74 in Detroit. So with drugs and alcohol, what do? They do nothing. When the kids are buying and selling it, using it, and everything else, if there is any kind of accountability, it's very minor. What could they do? Put in a voluntary drug testing program, the West Valley method. But also, sometimes if you got a bigger school, you kind of got to show them that you're recommending this, but if they don't want to go clean and sober, that there'll be accountability. In which case, you simply press charges with the police and arrest them because it's illegal. How many schools have I ever seen do this? None. And if it does, it's still, if you don't combine it with the voluntary drug testing program, that makes them want to be clean and sober. And then holding the idea that you're going to enforce the law as a possibility is another reason. It's another reason they want to be sober. It's like there's two reasons why I don't drive 100 miles an hour on the freeway. One reason is because I care about others and don't want to hurt them. The other one is I know if I do, I'm going to get ticketed, lose my license, go to jail. Which one really is important in helping me be a safe driver? Both. Which approach to getting kids off drugs and alcohol in school works the best? Combining the speak to the good in them that makes them where they want to be good, and also let them know there's consequences that can be there. We'd like to hear from you on this.
Paul, can I jump in?
Please do.
So I know that you have experienced so much of this, and you've worked with kids to really help them get better. And I know you're passionate about this topic. So can you share with us a little bit more about what can people do? You're giving a lot of suggestions, but what can they do themselves to maybe push their schools to do what you're suggesting?
Good question, Jan. What they can do is, for starters, go to your school board meetings, write op-eds about why your school refuses to put together this two-pronged approach to saving these kids' lives, because that's what you're doing. They're destroying themselves. They're going to be old and broken down before they're old enough to vote if they don't get away from how abusive they're using these drugs. And the drugs, as we know, like with fentanyl, horrible, and then now there's something I don't even know the name of it. Oh, it's many times worse than fentanyl. What they can do is, if you're a parent, you simply don't put up with it at all. They don't drink, they don't use, and if they do, if you find it there, anything in the house, you're going to arrest them. If they don't stop, you're going to put them out of the house. And, the answers are, I've found, Jan, over the years, working almost exclusively with challenging kids, the most challenging. All kids are challenging. You simply enforce, the answers are simple. They're just not easy. And pardon me. So what you've got is, at home, they've either got to follow your rules, obey the laws, or go live somewhere else. You've got to be willing to take that stand. If you're not, good luck. That's all you can say. If you'll do that, they'll respect themselves, they'll respect you. There might be a little adjustment period, we'll call it, but it works. Now in the schools, just keep banging on the door. There's a great parable in the Bible that Jesus gave. And it's often called the parable of persistence. And it was not about some high-level theological point. He said, if you need something, go to your neighbor, knock on the door, even if it's late at night, and ask him to come to the door. And the neighbor will hear you, and he really won't want to get up, and he'll say, go away, it's late, I'm in bed with my wife and family, and come back another time. And Jesus said, who is known as the greatest teacher, don't stop pounding on the door at all, and sooner or later, he will get out of bed, he will give you a cup of sugar or a loaf of bread or whatever it is you needed, not because he really wanted to, but just to get you to get out of there. It takes persistence to do the right thing. And so with your schools, keep banging on the door. Go to the school board meeting. Announce a press conference to your local media and tell them you're just fed up with that your school leaders are literally killing these kids by just not enforcing the rules. It's not the children's fault. Children do. Anybody listening to this, I would guess of any age, if you're an adult, what are you doing? What did you do as a child? You did what we all did, and that is anything you could get away with. And what made a difference in our lives was when we had good adults at home and at school who said, no, here's the parameters, here's the fences, you're not going to go past these, or you wish you hadn't. And that's what we're not giving our children. We're not giving it to them at home, parents. Pardon me. And this will be coming up later. You often hear schools say, oh, the parents just aren't involved, and the parents this and that. No, don't believe it. The parents are not doing their job with their kids any more than the schools are. Some are, but the majority no. And so get a hold of your school board, go to the school board publicly, embarrass the heck out of them, ask kids to speak up at your press conference about what they're seeing, write op-eds about it, go on local talk shows. Don't stop until, not because they want to, but just because they want to make you stop banging figuratively on their public image. They will do something. And a lot of it they can do is just simply enforce. Kids who are dealing drugs regularly at school and getting others into using them simply need to be removed from the school. There's put them on independent study. You don't have to expel them. Put them in independent study and say, show me a monthly drug test and do well on that for a few months. Then let's talk. How much do they do this? They don't do it. So what we've got. No kids are coming. Then they're not coming clean and sober. Then you've got the third one. That's being more challenging because this one scares the adults, and that is the violence and the levels of disrespect going on in our schools. If you haven't had an unannounced visit in a regular classroom in the last, and it's not just now, it's been stepping itself up from 20 and 30 years ago, but it's like at a fever pitch right now.
Isn't it true that in Washoe County schools, at least, that trustees have not been able to just go in unannounced? Is that true?
Oh yeah, good question, Jan. All these things kind of interweave. To go in and see how bad the violence and the disrespect is, and just flat out criminal behavior, you need to be able to just, as like board members should be able to do, and so should anybody responsible in the community, most certainly any parent, should be able to go to school, show them your ID, say, I just want to go into I don't want to see the drone lab. I don't want to go to the way back where they've got the AP students, a handful of them doing physics, half of whom were pushed into the class and don't know what's going on in there either. No, you just want to go out in a regular campus, go at lunchtime, walk in the bathrooms, but you'll have to have the principal unlock them because their solution for problems in the bathroom in many schools is just lock them up. And when you go in there, what you'll see is all these things going on. You'll see roughly Oh, roughly, students talk to me. They say if there's 30 kids in their class, in a typical class, there's maybe 5 or 6 paying any attention to what the teacher's saying. And the rest of them, what are they doing? Sleeping, eating, playing on their phones, groping each other, saying hugely obscene and vulgar and hateful and threatening things to the teacher just to see who can top this. And because nothing happens when they get sent to the office, often they come back, if you can believe this, they come back with a bag of popcorn and a Coke from the principal's office.
Wow.
Yeah, unbelievable. And believe me, this has happened. Ask teachers anywhere you're living. Ask the kids if this is going on. Ask the teachers. But so, why it's hard to get in and see them is a lot of schools, Washoe has 2 policies passed by by the current interim superintendent, the one who ran for her professional career but finally decided to come back and make a few extra dollars. She instilled 2 policies that try to talk about how much they encourage free speech as like a preamble to try to make it sound like it was going to be something positive, hoping people would not read the rest of the policy. But what it goes on to say is just essentially any teacher who says anything, anywhere, at any time about something violent or illegal or immoral that they've seen can lose their job. You may think to yourself, how could this be when we've got freedom of speech is one of our 5 freedoms in the Constitution, First Amendment?
Well, that's been rough lately.
Yeah. Well, it's because it hasn't been challenged, and the teachers are on the positive side. If you want to spin it, you can say they're prevented from it. They can't do it. On the negative side, you've got to say they don't care enough about the situation to speak up. And again, as someone who lost 6 jobs for speaking up and fighting against superintendents, principals, etc., I do not have a lot of sympathy for those who say, I couldn't speak up or I'd lose my job. Go back through American history. What's kept us free and what started us out back in the Revolutionary period. If these people's primary concern would be what might happen to me if I told the truth, we wouldn't have a country. Actually, we wouldn't have Christianity if Jesus' prime concern had been what will happen to me if I tell the truth. So whether you see that as a Christian, whether you just see that as a historical event where it took speaking up to bring a higher level of things into being, you can be as afraid as you want. There's nothing wrong with that. You can be as worried as you want. Nothing wrong with that. What's really wrong is if you let being afraid stop you from doing the right thing. So this is why they don't know this is going on, Jan. They keep them out, and now they have a thing where when they're going to let a community member come in there, even for not even to really thoroughly check things out, you stop now in the offices, and a growing number of schools have this. You give all your personal information beyond what you ever should, and then you promise that you are not ever going to tell anybody about what you see. They've just got an iron curtain. What do we got, Jen?
We got a question here.
Great.
It says, Paul, it seems like public schools went off the rails when biblical values and morality were systematically removed by the Supreme Court. How can we infuse these principles back into the schools? Did you touch on these concepts in your classrooms? And that's from Doug in North Carolina. Thanks, Doug.
Oh, thanks, Doug. Say it one more time there, Jan. It was that these things come from...
Sure. It seems like public schools went off the rails when biblical values and morality were removed by the Supreme Court. So how can we infuse the principles back into the schools? And did you talk about these concepts in your classrooms?
Yeah, great question. That's at the heart of it. My dad was a teacher, and in his day, they might start the day saying the Lord's Prayer or praying or something like this. And there's a lot of people out there who feel that if we talked more about God, or the heart of parochial schools of any religion is bringing this into it. I myself found that not so much talking about it as living it myself, living my own spiritual values, is what disseminated them the best throughout the classes in the schools. And that I can think of a lot of scenarios where if people were going to actually teach scriptural teachings, the question arises: what religion, what scripture, what take on the scripture, etc. And this can become tough. But we definitely need to get back to, I think, the spiritual values that I found pretty much great agreement on in teaching comparative religions unit over many years with kids. It was always their favorite one. Some kid would always come up after you had taught roughly the general principles of Christianity, Judaism, Islam, Buddhism, Hinduism. Some kid would always say, well, gosh, they seem to kind of all have the same idea. Treat people right, do some things for others, forgive others, stand up for what's wrong and against what's wrong. And so we talked about the fact that what wasn't the problem? The problem was not that these teachings were not there. The problem is that they weren't living them. And so we've gotten away from teaching, Doug. Going back to your question, we've gotten away from teaching universally accepted values, and we've gotten to the point where, just to tell it like it is, I feel that most teachers, I'm not familiar with hardly anybody I know teaching in the schools right now who would consider themselves a strong Christian or a strong Jew or a strong follower of Islam. They've just gotten to where secularism has kind of become the teaching of the day. And so they don't believe it themselves, the teachers. They don't teach it to the kids. They don't practice it. And as a result, it's not happening. And so, for example, think of the Ten Commandments, where it says, like, don't lie. Okay, well, if you have in your own heart, if that child is getting from his own parents, don't do it because God says it's wrong. Well, if you don't have that, why wouldn't you lie? It keeps you out of trouble. Temporarily. Why wouldn't you steal something? Unless if you believe God says it's wrong. If you don't believe that, well, of course you'd steal. You get more and you don't have to pay for it. I mean, they don't. We need more living of these biblical principles. And they're not being lived, so they're not being taught. And the kids aren't being taught it at home. Some are. Some parents are doing a great job with that. But it's the minority. And so that's why we need to really dig into parents at schools and say, whatever it is you believe, even if it's radical, totally atheistic secularism, surely you would teach them these basic principles of honesty and forgiveness and responsibility and unselfishness. But they're not working with the parents. They're not believing it themselves. The kids aren't getting it. The teachers don't believe it themselves. So you see where we end up. But to simply think that sitting down and I don't know, forcing kids to read a daily Bible lesson or something. When there's a line in the Bible that says, St. Paul wrote, always be ready to give people a reason for the hope that lies within you. Well, if you're a teacher and somebody says, boy, you're doing a great job, you can pat yourself on the back and smile and say, yeah, I guess I am pretty special. Or you can say, well, I find that when I pray and try to live what I'm praying in my daily life, it makes everything better, including my teaching. We can do that, but we don't. Now, in schools that I ran, we had some really astounding academic growth. I mean, like 4 and 5 years of academic growth in 1 year with many students. And one day we were celebrating it. It's one of my favorite stories. We were celebrating this one boy's 5 years, I believe, of academic growth he did on a very objective, standardized test. And his name was Uriel. And I said, well, this is such a great moment. I said, Uriel here has picked up 5 years. And I said, but as a teacher, I'm puzzled how this happened, because I said, I like to think that maybe I had a big old, what would you call it, like a chute or something for pouring something into his, pouring all this knowledge into him. And then it was just because of my spectacular teaching that he learned so much. I said, but I don't think that's the case. And kids being like they are, one said right away, you're right, Mr. White, you're not that good. And I said, I agreed with him. I said, but we know he made this growth. So if it wasn't from this being poured into his ear, some super spectacular human effort on my part, how did it happen? And the room went quiet for a few moments. And then somebody said, well, maybe it was in him already? And I said, well, what other explanation is there? And of course, it kind of parallels that old saying, a child is not a vessel to be filled, but a lamp to be lighted. And this is what happens. As schools have parents who are holding these values themselves, teaching them to their kids, but we don't question the parents. The kids don't get anything. They don't get it from the schools. Nothing happens. And that's why, like, our kids are years behind, hugely functionally illiterate. It should be of no surprise to anyone. But when we've got these values coming in and being taught right from the home right up through the school, why it awakens in the child the fact that, however you want to explain it, whether you say it's just the wonder of limitless human intelligence opening up, or whether we want to say it's kind of like a child starting to learn more like the child of God that he was created to be. However you want to explain it, I can guarantee you see it happen. And this is, again, what I've seen for many years.
I want to make sure that you let everybody know about next week.
Yeah. Let me, we've got so many good things we're getting into next week. We only got through our absence and our substance abuse, a little bit on learning. There's so much more to be said on why kids aren't learning and what's going on. Parents' roles, the issue of special ed, discipline, what works and what doesn't. What you can do about it, what we're trying to do about it here, how we've got to stand up together on this. There's just so many good things to go into about this. Like I said, if your child's in any kind of special ed, or you know anybody who has their children in there, you want to get them out as soon as you can. If you've got school police at your school, you don't want more of them. You don't want any of them. And I'll explain to you why you actually get far worse discipline problems and behavior issues and criminal incidents with the school police than you get without them.
Are you planning on having any guests in future shows?
Yeah, we'll have guests in the future coming up talking about theirs. Just lots of good things on what you can do to make your schools do the right thing. Options you have for educating your child. If you haven't, we all hear about homeschool. There's many other options. What the only real solution is for fixing our schools. This and much more coming up next week. Again, we'll go back here. I'm trying to find my notes.
So I'll remind you that you need to go to educationcrusade.org, and if that was what you're looking for.
Yep, you can go to that's one, Tony. Thank you. Educationcrusade.org. You can sign up for our free periodical briefs that come out on local issues and some national about what we're trying to do about them, what you can do about them in your neighborhood. Again, you go on YouTube Live, LaRue Press Network, and it'll come up. If you missed this live today, you can tell your friend they can go on there and they can read it from the archive. They can contact us. They can text anytime. Doesn't have to be necessarily on the day of the show. But other than that, we appreciate you tuning in. We'll just get way more specific as it goes on. We've got a ton of interesting information. We'll just leave you. We've just got a moment.
I want to also make sure that you do a little plug for your book, because LaRue Press helped publish that. So
Yeah.
we got to do the promo stuff, right?
Parents want an idea. Gosh, where do I start teaching my kid morals? My wife and I, Valerie, have a book out. It's called Bible Morals for Children, A Parent's Guide. And doesn't matter what denomination you might be, or if you don't believe in God at all, the Bible is the most respected teacher of moral values we've ever had. And you can get this through, how can they get it, Jean?
They can go on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, go to LaRue Press, and you can find it with us. You go to thebookgallerynv.com, and you'll be able to hook up there and get that book.
What it gives you is 60 or 70 brief tellings. You can do each chapter in 10 minutes or less a day. Read it with your child. Gives you a couple of things to talk about. Just a real simple approach to basically how to stand up, be morally strong, be pure-minded, be unselfish, be kind. Don't let your fear stop you from doing the right thing. It's just a great little boost. I find parents appreciate it, enjoy it just as much as their kids do. So that's about it for today. Wrapping it up. Again, we want to hear from you. Please let us know if you were listening, what you thought of it, any issues you'd like covered, and I guarantee you, the material will just get better and better each week.
Absolutely, and you can always text at 775-399-2888, and that is 24/7. So if you have a question for Paul, we'll make sure he gets it. And again, you can contact him at educationcrusade.org. And we appreciate everybody listening to the LaRue Press Network, and we're so happy to have you, Paul. Thank you for coming on to our network and sharing your Get Schooled.
You're welcome.
All right.
Well, we'll send you out with a thought that said one time: if you think you can or you think you can't, you're right. And this really applies to our children. Really applies to our children. You fix yourself on a vision of who they really are, who God made them to be. And you just hold on to that until you start to see it. And you hold on to it, they will start to see that in themselves. Thank you for joining us. We hope to hear from you and see you next